Coming up on show 693, yet another country gets red hot for EV sales. But which one? I'll tell you more. Plus, we're talking about the big event over the weekend in Miami, the big EV Meetup. Big plans for Opel's battery factory. Jaguar hit a bit of a snag with the I-PACE production, and which EV is going to lose least value if you buy it new 1 year after taking delivery. I will spill the beans on the podcast today. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. I've been saying that for almost 700 shows now. Welcome to EV News Daily, start of the week edition, Monday 10th of February. Show 693 today, 7 away from 700. How have I done that? Wow. My name is Martyn Lee, going through every EV story so you don't have to. Well, thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. MyEV, of course, is the world's first platform to buy and sell purely cars with plug sockets and learn about them along the way. Resources for dealers as well, helping you out with warranties and insurances. And over the weekend, they organised a big EV meetup. The adoption of electric cars has been growing at an exponential rate over recent years, and that growth has prominently been on display at several big EV meetups. Of course, there was the big fully charged US event over a couple of days at Circuit of the Americas. I'd love to have been at that. And over the weekend, I'd love to have been in Miami for EVs and Tea, a big meetup in Miami at Basecamp Miami in Florida, organised by MyEV and Evernex and Inside EVs. It's garnered national attention. I've seen so much coverage of it over the weekend, a result of a huge turnout, says EV Byte, rather than meeting up at an empty parking lot as is common with many EV events. And those events are great, by the way. You meet a handful of people, maybe 10, 20, or even 50 cars turn up. That's a big event. No, over the weekend, it was a proper big meetup. MyEV were the hosts, and they put in all the structure and the infrastructure around it. There was a timetable of activities and speakers and events. Ever popular people like Starman were there taking photos and selfie with you, a scale model of the Tesla Cybertruck. Multiple public discussions held around EVs and infrastructure. Big EV personalities were there over the weekend as well. And Tesla themselves were even there with a representative, along with Jaguar and Audi showing off the I-PACE and the E-Tron. If you went along, hope you had a fantastic time last weekend. If they do it all over again next year, I promise I'll jump on a flight and spend the 9 hours travelling to Miami. Well, the car maker Opel has set itself the goal of producing the best, most efficient and most environmentally friendly battery cells at a new cell production plant at the Kaiserslautern sites. Not only an important day for Prime Minister Dreyer, says swr.ede, and as you may have sussed from that URL, it's a German website that I'm reading from, so forgive my translation. Some of the news was known already, but there was a big event last Friday that I'm just finally getting around to report on, where a new battery production plant with almost 25 gigawatt hours of production every year, a proper gigafactory. Construction of the new facility begins in 2023. The first section is live in 2024, and up to 500,000 batteries for EVs will be built there every single year. The most important details about the new battery plant in the area has been known for a couple of months now. In addition to the plant at Kaiserslautern, there should be a second battery facility, which they're building in France. Now, the French battery manufacturer Saft and the Opel parent company PSA plan to invest a total of 6 billion euros in the two factories. The factory is funded in a way that, this is the whole point of me reporting on this story. Really, the battery factory is being funded by France. The battery factory is being funded by Germany, and the rest of the money coming from the European Union. A total of 1.3 billion euros is being spent. You see, lots of people, and this is understandable, and I do myself as well, lots of people say, well, what are the car companies doing about all of this? What are the battery companies doing? And sometimes we forget, actually, once nations and things like the EU decide, you know what, the Americans, the Koreans, the Chinese are having it all their own way, You'd be surprised how much money can be unlocked at that political level. The Federal Minister of Economics travelled to the site and said the federal government would participate in a 3-digit million amount to help out as well. And I'll pop a link in the show notes if you want to look at your own Google translation of that article, but very, very interesting. Big battery plants coming online all the time now all around the world, and always happy to report on not one but two more. I'm not happy on reporting on the next story because, you know what, I was on the motorway today driving our little Renault Zoe through the storm that we've got at the minute in Great Britain, and it was pretty windy and rainy. The Zoe's quite high-sided as well, so at times I could really feel the wind, but a Jaguar I-PACE did come past. Of course, I bored my wife by pointing out every EV that we see. She's like, yes, I know by now, but of course it drove past, and I went, I-PACE? She did acknowledge me. To be fair, she's long-suffering, but she went, oh yes. I said, I-PACE? They're nice. They are very nice. Jaguar's best-selling I-PACE electric car has a problem, though. They've run out of battery, says the Times newspaper. Jaguar is pressing pause on production at their factory. Well, it's not theirs, but the factory at which it's made. You see, they outsource the production of it. It's obviously a Jaguar, but not wanting to build a whole new facility at their base, they got somebody else to make the I-PACE for them. The factory in Austria is being paused for 1 week because of a shortage of lithium-ion batteries, says the Times. The I-PACE's batteries, and the Times writes it I-PACE. They don't stylize it correctly. I hate that. Nobody else does, by the way. It's just my brain is kind of wired with EV stuff. It's capital I hyphen capital PACE. Come on, people. The I-PACE and the batteries are supplied by LG Chem, South Korean electronics giants LG Chem. They make them at a factory in Poland, and Jaguar's woes reflect car makers' struggles these days to meet the surging demand for electric cars and slashing emissions, and the supply chains are not as robust as the ones that have been around 100 years of building their combustion cars. That's why sometimes things like this happen. Jaguar sold about 18,000 I-PACEs last year, and it won the World Car of the Year award. Ministers last week unveiled a ban on sale of new fossil cars from 2035 in this country. I'll pop a link to the Times in the show notes. It is behind a paywall, but I hope that Jaguar, well, those that make the I-PACE for Jaguar, I hope that Magna are back and making the I-PACE again very soon. In the kind of the three-way battle, the I-PACE, Jaguar I-PACE versus Audi e-tron 55 versus Mercedes-Benz EQC, that is the one that comes in ever so slightly cheaper than in that triplet of EVs, SUVs. That's sort of the £61,000 isn't cheap, but it's the cheapest. An article I found online over the weekend entitled 10 Cars That Lose the Least Value 1 year after driving off the lot made me smile because Tesla don't have lots. Isn't lot another word for like the car dealer? Well, of course Tesla do online sales. I suppose you pick the car up though, don't you, from a Tesla centre? Well, you won't be surprised to hear the car that took the number one spot was the Tesla Model 3, leading the ranking with a loss in value of only 5.5%. That's on average $2,500 in the first 12 months of owning it. The study was done by IC Cars. And the Tesla Model 3 average new car price was estimated by applying a used car trim distribution to pre-rebate prices. Of course, there simply aren't many Model 3s on the market. Those that are putting their Model 3... I had a quick look on Auto Trader. And those that are putting the Model 3 online second-hand are putting them online, some of them, for more than it costs to get a new one. You've got to be really, really daft to buy a car that's done a couple of thousand miles as second-hand for more than it would take to go online right now at Tesla.com and just buy a new one. Okay, so you've got to wait a couple of weeks, but the waiting times are so short now. There's ships arriving all the time into Europe and the UK, and you haven't got to wait very long at all. Why would you pay more for a Model 3? But I don't know. I mean, that's the used car market, and there's so few Model 3s on the market right now. That's why it loses the least value. I'll say this all the time on the podcast as well, partly so that people don't get the wrong end of the stick, because I feel very... It's just one of those things that I feel very strongly about. I never recommend that you buy a new car as any sort of financial wisdom. Anything that has four wheels and moves you around is going to go down in value really, really quickly. But, asterisk, caveat to what I just said, Model 3 isn't losing value very much. Certainly the car that I drive, the Renault Zoe, is the fastest selling used car in the whole country, ICE cars and EV cars combined. And they hold their values really well. I'm not telling you to buy a new car, because you will lose money, but there are worse things you could do if you really want a new car than to buy an EV. Okay, you know the name Airstream, don't you? They make those iconic camper trailers. Airstream, the most recognisable shapes on the road, and the company's aluminium-bodied trailers are so super cool. Their design hasn't changed much really over 90 years, yet with a focus on retro design, they're looking to the future, says Roadshow by CNET. Airstream is working on technology that is incorporating electric drivetrains into the camper trailers. Airstream is currently in the experimental stage of mounting electric motors on the axle, which powers the wheels and provides extra driving force to the car that's towing it. Now, of course, there are hurdles to overcome. The key objective is to make it so the trailer never pushes against the tow vehicle or does more drag than it should do. They need to work in harmony, but that's what they're working on. And hasn't that just blown your mind? Because we think about EVs as being cars, bikes, maybe boats, planes, maybe one day. But what about Airstream trailers being an EV? They'll push you along. Of course, a big camper, lots of room underneath it for a big flat battery. I'd never thought of that before. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's one of the reasons I adore the work that it takes to put this podcast together, to genuinely learn something every single day. Okay, it's very late at night here. It's been a very busy weekend. I could probably just do with kind of, kicking back and relaxing. But for me, this is so much fun to find stories like this for you in my spare time. Well, moving on to the lead story today, yet another country, another market has just blown up, gone red hot for EVs. And this time, it's Sweden. Amazes with a 31% plug-in market share last month in January. The passenger plug-in electric car market in Sweden just doubled, an all-time high in January 2020, says Inside EVs. The number of registrations amounted to over 5,000, 94% more than a year ago. But more importantly, in a shrinking car market, EVs rose hugely. Now, a third of all new cars sold had a plug socket. I mean, it's very rare that we see any country around the world have more than 10%. Those, you know the usual ones. Norway. EV Sales blog says that the plug-in cars as well were actually hybrids that Sweden's gone mad for. The VW Passat GTE is at top. The Mitsubishi Outlander, which is the number one plug-in in this country, did number two. Third was the Kia Optima plug-in hybrid, and that had about 486 registrations. I'll put a link to EV Sales blog in the show notes if you want to see the full article. So Mini has finally tapped into the EV markets, apart from an experiment maybe 10 years ago with a limited edition experimental Mini. But no, for the first time proper, Mini has now got the Cooper SE. Takes its juice from a 32.6 kilowatt hour battery. Of course, that supports DC fast charging, getting to about 80%, in about 35 minutes. If you are familiar with the BMW i3, take out the lecky bits from what's underneath the skin, put them inside a Mini Cooper SE, and you've got what basically makes that run. Charging at home takes about 4 hours on your standard wall box at home. They give the range. I hate it when they do this. I'd rather they just gave the WLTP range, and we'll work it out and factor in weather, or, the EPA range in America. But Mini give you a range. It'll do between 146 and 167 miles. That's between 235 and 270 kilometres, says Car Scoops. Now, the MSRP for this is $29,900. Excluding the $850 destination and handling charge. But, of course, with the US federal tax credit and EV tax, you could pay as little as $17,900 for a brand new Mini Cooper SE, about the price of a mid-spec Ford Fiesta. Alright, final story today then, to start your week on Monday. Citroën has released a new video on its social media channels listing all the ways that electricity has changed our lives. And at the end of the clip, the company teases the front end, a couple of front lights and like a light bar, like an LED light bar, the front end of a model that it says it will democratise electric mobility. The Citroën electric car, which we know little about so far, is going to be debuted on February the 27th, according to Car Advice. The tagline at the end of the video places a great amount of emphasis on the letter E. The letter E in Citroën. And anytime the E is on screen in their tagline, they highlight it as E for electric. Okay, question of the week. I'm thinking of driving to Italy in the next couple of months. I'm meant to be flying there, but I'm thinking maybe I'll drive because I can do it on electric energy. Better, it keeps my flight miles down. Oh, I probably should fly it to make the time that I'm away from home minimised, what with a little new addition to the family. But I'm thinking of driving to Italy. It's 1,028 miles from my house to Pisa. It's 17 hours according to Google Maps, but it may be a bit longer. Channel tunnel to France, drive straight down France, skirt round Switzerland, northern Italy, past Milan into Pisa. So I'm thinking about how I do that in terms of charging. Won't be in a Tesla. What's the longest EV road trip you've ever taken? And if you haven't, what's the longest EV road trip you would take, in theory? Email me your thoughts, hello@evnewsdaily.com, or on the YouTube comments. Well, thank you to 231 patrons of the podcast that make this show happen. If you haven't heard Sunday's show yet yesterday, then go back in reverse order, and I read out all the patrons at exec, producer, and above level, all their names, on a Sunday. If you're interested and you're curious, and it's totally optional, Patreon is patreon.com/evnewsdaily. They look after all the kind of credit card stuff and the billing, and it's safe and it's secure, and I never get those details. But for what costs you basically a fancy coffee once a month, you would get to make this show and fund it. Well, there are 692 previous shows in the archive, and if you can share the show anytime with anyone, please do so. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. Remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.